Welcome to This Magical Life, where we explore druidry, mindfulness, and the magic of living. I'm your host, Philip Carr-Gomm.
Someone from Canada sent in this. I want to explore how to deal with the loss of trees in my neighborhood. I feel quite connected to the trees around me and find it absolutely heartbreaking to deal with the loss due to property sales and construction. Is there any way we could touch on this in any meaningful way? So let me just share my feelings on this, and this follows on rather well from the Children's Forest Project. So trees are very much to the fore, and of course they're central to us as druids or people interested in the druid tradition. Druid meaning forest sage. And so here's what comes to me. This sense of the loss of trees, this awful heartbreaking feeling when you discover a favorite tree of yours, or not even a favorite, just a tree that you're walking along the street and they're cutting it down, or you're going in the park and they're being cut down. And I guess we've all had those experiences. We've had some big ones around here over the years. And it's devastating, that feeling of loss. And for me, the first step is just stopping and allowing the feelings. Just being silent, just allowing the sense of loss and the feelings of loss. So my natural tendency when I experience loss, when I see a tree being cut down, is to go into action straight away and to start complaining. And it's good to do that. But first of all, I think the first thing is just to stop and just to feel it. And the image that comes to me is of the Scots pine. You know, the beautiful Scots pine, that incredible shape that is sometimes a lone tree or sometimes comes in clumps. And it's true that many trees are being cut down and that this is a real issue. But it's also true that there are many extraordinary initiatives, and the Children's Forest Initiative that is one of them, but there are many other ones. And one of the things that we can do when we experience the loss of a tree is, first of all, not to rush the grieving process, the sense of loss, the sense of outrage as well, and anger that can evoke. But then when we've worked through that, to choose a project, to plant a tree ourselves if we can, or more trees ourselves physically if we can't for whatever reason, then to support a tree planting project. There's so many of them. On the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids website, we've chosen a number of charities that we support. Trees for Life up in Scotland, the Children's Forest, the Woodland Trust, Tree Aid that works in Africa. And we put our energy into that. And I'll tell you my experience of using anger and outrage. And it really worked. And one time it didn't, but it sort of did. At one time they tried to cut down a whole bunch of trees just over there. And I happened to be walking by while they were using the chainsaws. And so I quickly stood by them and found out what they were doing, and telephoned Stephanie and offered them cups of tea and to slow them down so we could think. And the next clue came when they asked me to move, and I said, why? And they said, because we can't cut the trees while you're here. So I said, oh, that's great, I'll stay here. And and then the story developed. But basically, while I stood there and waited, and they got their boss and they tried to move me and they threatened to call the police and so on. We got all the neighbors out. So suddenly we had 40 people standing there complaining. And basically we kept the trees. They'd never cut them down. So that was a success story. And it was predicated on luck of just happening to pass by. If I'd been away that day, hadn't walked past, they may well have all gone. The next time they tried to cut, they succeeded on a Sunday in cutting down a whole bunch of huge trees just up at the top of the road there. And we managed to save some of them by complaining. We tried to get the police involved. Long story, I won't go into it. But what a wise friend told me, who ran a tree magazine, he said, be careful, because the anger can eat away at you and it just goes on and on. And I found that. I developed this project. I started writing to everybody. I wrote to the Queen, to the government, to everybody, and I thought I'll make a book of all the replies I get about this, and we'll really, and I noticed, and I discovered that it was becoming a kind of obsession, trying to save these trees and only partly succeeding and not getting them to commit to replanting more. Having said that, when I say it failed, an interesting thing, about 2 years later, there was a big copper beech that we managed to save. We did a thing called a fax attack, which is, I don't think people have fax machines anymore, or certainly not fax machines with paper. But the fax attack was in the days when they had fax machines, you just get everybody to send long letters complaining. And so the machine is just churning away all day, using up their paper. It's tragic, isn't it? Yeah, using up the paper made by trees. Yeah, and making a fuss and so on. And 2 years later, we managed to save this tree. 2 years later, I was walking up past the tree with the dog, and there were these guys with chainsaws up in the branches. And I had that immediate sinking of my heart. I thought, there you go. They've waited 2 years. They've waited till we've quietened down, and then now they're doing it quickly. Well, and I gave up. I just carried on walking, and I just felt all my energy drained out of me. And I felt miserable. I walked a few yards, and then I got a surge of energy, and I thought, no, damn it, I'm going back. So I walked back, and I shouted up to the guy, what are you doing? And this guy came down, and he said, well, there's just a few little dead branches we have to cut. But ever since some guy complained a couple of years ago and made such a fuss, we have to have all these people watching us. And he pointed, and there were men in clipboards observing them and ticking boxes and all the rest of it. And, to make sure that we do it correctly and all the rest of it. So it was a kind of success in that way. So it's not like I'm saying one shouldn't engage in activism and in protest. But I just think one has to be really careful, because it can just kind of eat you up. So it's, when it's the right time, it's great. So thank you to Logan for sending that suggestion in. It's something that is dear to the hearts of all of us, I think. That we had and I think druids, of course, people who love nature, of course. But what's fantastic is that the general population, more and more as well. Just one more story before we finish. The British government, about, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, said that they were going to privatize all the national forests. And we were so upset. We got hold of all the musicians in the order and friends of theirs who were famous, pop musicians and so on. And in lightning speed, we were starting to put together an album. And Jamie Reed, the famous punk artist who did the Sex Pistols album, who is a druid, he did a cover for the album for us. And we were going to launch it with a big fanfare and protests and all the rest of it. Just as we were about to do that, we were kind of halfway through gathering the music together. What happened is the general public became furious, and the government realized they'd made a mistake and backed down. There was too much opposition. So we were really pleased, because it wasn't just us, it was everyone. And I think this is the case now. More and more people really love trees. And so if you want some ideas, go on the OBOD website. You'll see about us, our charities, and there's some little films on each of the charities for trees that we support. And we have a sacred grove planting program, and we have, through Trees for Life, we've planted thousands of trees in as a grove for Newen, the founder of the order, which you might like to get involved in. I'll pop the URL in the comments here. So many, many blessings to you, and have a really good week. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of This Magical Life. Stay connected and join us again soon for more magical insights.